People always say a moment sneaks up on you, some shift in the air, barely noticeable until suddenly it's all you can think about. For me, it started on a Tuesday, the kind that feels like filler in a week. I wasn't expecting anything, definitely not her. I was locking up the small repair shop where I worked, a narrow, cluttered place that always smelled faintly of oil and warm dust. The kind of shop that shouldn't survive in a world of big commercial centers, but somehow kept limping along. I was trying to finish early, wiping my hands on my shirt and thinking about going straight home. No plans, no excitement. Then the glass door jingled behind me. I almost said, "Sorry, we're closed." But the word stuck because she stepped inside, confident, deliberate, not rushing the way customers usually did. She looked mid-40s, maybe older, but the kind of older that didn't look worn or tired. More like she'd lived through things and somehow came out sharper. A tailored coat, hair tied back loosely, hands tucked into pockets like she was holding something she didn't want to spill. "Are you still taking walk-ins?" she asked. Her voice, steady, low, made me straighten up more than I meant to. I nodded. Yeah? Yeah, sure. What do you need fixed?" She held up her phone, cracked from corner to corner. But she kept her eyes on me instead of the device, like she was studying something. Not in a weird way, just noticing. "It fell," she said, though her tone made it sound like the fall wasn't the important part. I motioned her over to the counter. My hands were still dirty, so I kept them close, trying not to leave smudges on anything. I was suddenly too aware of how young I must have looked. 20-something, slightly messy hair, sleeves rolled up because the shop ran hot. Next to her, I felt unfinished. She placed the phone down gently. "Sorry for coming in so late." "It's fine," I said. "I'm usually here too long anyway." She smiled at that. A small, tired smile that made me feel like I'd said something meaningful when I hadn't. While I worked, she walked slowly around the shop, observing the old radio on the shelf, the jars of screws, the dusty fan in the corner. Not judging, more like she was piecing together who I was through the clutter. "You keep things," she said quietly. "What?" She gestured to a stack of parts one hadn't thrown out yet. "You're the type that thinks something broken still has a purpose." I didn't know why, but that comment hit deeper than it should have. I pretended to focus on the tiny screwdriver between my fingers. "Maybe," I murmured. "Sometimes it's easier to fix a thing than let it go." She didn't answer, but the silence felt tuned, like we were both hearing the same quiet note. When I handed her the repaired phone, our fingers brushed, barely, but enough that my breath caught for half a second. She didn't pull back immediately. Neither did I. Her eyes softened, not in pity, just recognition. She paid, thanked me, and turned toward the door. Then she paused, just long enough to make me wonder if she was going to say something else. But she only adjusted her coat and left. The door chimed behind her, and the shop felt colder instantly. I locked up again, but my hand hovered over the switch longer than needed. That tiny moment, the brush of her fingers, the way she looked at me like she already knew parts of me I never said aloud, replayed in loops all night. I kept telling myself it meant nothing, but I'm still thinking about it. More than I should. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. I told myself that the first time was coincidence, a crack in a phone, a late walk-in, nothing more. But 2 days later, she appeared in the doorway again, this time without anything broken in her hands. She paused, noticing the smudge of grease on my cheek before I did. "I think you dropped this." She held up a small metal connector I must have left in the parking lot. It wasn't important, something worth a few rupees at most, but she held it like it mattered. I wiped my hands on a rag, a little too fast. "Thanks. You didn't have to come all the way back for that. Maybe I was in the area." She said it lightly, but her eyes flicked away right after. A micro-hesitation like she wasn't used to explaining herself. The shop was quieter today. No customers. Just the buzz of an old fluorescent light and the warm smell of solder. She lingered near the counter, fingers trailing along the edge as if she needed something to anchor her. "You look tired," I said before thinking. She exhaled softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture too controlled, like she didn't want anything slipping out of place. "Long week." "That bad?" She gave a small laugh, barely there. It's just never-ending. Meetings, people needing things, and then coming home to silence. She stopped suddenly, tightening her jaw. Sorry, you didn't ask for all that. No, it's okay. I leaned against the workbench, trying to keep my voice steady. Sometimes it's easier to tell a stranger. Her eyes lifted at that, searching me, almost curious whether I meant it. That was the moment I noticed her hands. Slim, elegant, but restless. She kept twisting her ring, sliding it up and down her finger without realizing. You're good at listening, she said. I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. I'm good at being quiet, mostly. Her smile faded, replaced by something gentler, or maybe more dangerous. That's rarer than you think. She wandered to the shelf where old radios sat half-repaired. She pressed one button, then another, smiling faintly as static filled the air. You fix things others don't bother with. She said it like an observation, but the air tightened between us anyway. I try, I replied. You must see a lot of damage then. Her voice cracked on that last word, barely noticeable, but enough that I looked up. Her posture had stiffened again, like she regretted letting anything slip. Before I could say something, she cleared her throat and stepped back. Anyway, I should go. She turned, digging in her bag for her keys. For a second, the light caught her hair, and I saw how exhausted she really was. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet, bone-level tiredness no one notices until they look too closely. Take care, I said. It came out softer than I intended. She stopped at the door, not fully turning, just tilting her head as if she heard something in my tone. A long second passed, longer than necessary, before she murmured, You too. She walked out, the door clicking behind her. But her hesitation at the threshold stayed with me, humming in my chest long after she was gone. The storm came out of nowhere. One minute the sky was washed in pale evening light. The next the street outside the shop blurred into streaks of rain. I had stayed late to finish inventory, half listening to the radio murmuring in the background. The door opened, and she stepped in, coat damp at the shoulders, hair slightly undone from the wind. Not polished like before, not guarded, just human. I'm sorry, she said, brushing water from her sleeve. I didn't realize the weather was this bad. You're soaked, I said, then immediately regretted how blunt that sounded. She laughed under her breath. Thank you for the observation. I handed her a clean towel from the back. She accepted it with both hands, as if it weighed more than fabric. Rain pattered heavily against the windows, sealing us into a small world of humming lights and warm air. She sat on a stool near the counter, towel pressed to her hair. I wasn't sure if she was waiting for the storm to pass or for something else entirely. You're still here, she said after a moment. Yeah, didn't feel like going home yet. Same, she murmured, almost too quietly. For a while, neither of us spoke. Her breathing slowed. Mine matched it without permission. The storm intensified, thunder rolling from somewhere far, but inevitable. It felt like the kind of night where people said things they'd regret in the morning. She tilted her head, studying a broken speaker I'd been working on. What's wrong with it? Bad wiring, I said. Whoever opened it last used the wrong voltage. That explains a lot, she whispered, staring at the speaker with an expression I couldn't read. Sad? Nostalgic? Something in between? She lifted her hand, brushing the dust lightly. Her fingers lingered, trembling so faintly that I thought I imagined it. My ex-husband used to fix ours, she said suddenly. Or pretend to. He liked the performance more than the task. I froze. She rarely mentioned personal things, and now she'd offered this unshielded piece of herself. Did he ever get them working? I asked. No, she said, smiling without humor. But he made everyone believe he could. There was a sharp honesty in her voice I hadn't heard before. A confession that wasn't meant to be one. Her phone buzzed. She tensed. The name on the screen was visible for just a second. Daniel, before she flipped it face down. You're not going to answer? I asked carefully. She shook her head, eyes on the floor. Not tonight. Lightning flashed, and for a moment her face softened, almost fragile. When she finally looked at me, there was a question there, quiet, dangerous, unfinished. You ever feel like, she stopped, pressing her lips together, like you're standing too close to something you shouldn't? My throat tightened. Yeah. She exhaled, and the sound felt like something between relief and fear. We ended up standing closer without consciously moving. One step, maybe two. Enough that I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, subtle, warm, mixing with the smell of rain. Her fingers brushed the back of my hand, barely a whisper of contact. She didn't pull away. I didn't either. Then the storm snapped a branch outside, a loud crack breaking the moment. She flinched and stepped back quickly, too quickly, as if the universe had just warned her. Sorry, she whispered. For what? She didn't say. For what almost happened, she didn't have to. I watched her turn toward the window, palms pressed to the cool glass, trying to breathe evenly. I stayed exactly where I was, hands still warm where her fingers had been, wanting to move closer again. But I didn't. Not yet. The storm had passed a day earlier, but something between us hadn't. The shop felt different now. Too still, as if the walls were waiting for something to be said. I pretended to reorganize shelves, but really, I was just avoiding looking at the door and hoping she'd walk through it. She did. Not with her usual calm. She stepped in like someone who'd rehearsed turning around twice before actually entering. Her eyes found mine immediately, too quickly, and she stopped a few feet from me, hands buried in her coat pockets. We need to talk, she said. My stomach tightened. Okay. The words hung there, heavy and unwelcomed. She moved slowly toward the middle of the shop, looking around as if trying to memorize every escape route. I shouldn't stay here so long, she said. It's not fair. To either of us. I forced a small laugh. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just a shop. She met my eyes then, holding my stare longer than she ever had. You know it's not just a shop. Silence. Heavy, slow, suffocating. I swallowed. Then what is it? She opened her mouth, closed it, looked down at her shoes. I don't know, she said finally. And that scares me. The honesty in her voice didn't sound like confession. It sounded like surrender, weak and reluctant, pulled out of her by forces she couldn't negotiate with. She walked to the counter and rested her palms on it, shoulders tense. I'm old enough to know better, she whispered. Old enough to walk away when things start feeling complicated. You're talking like something already happened, I said. Her head lifted sharply. She searched my face, maybe to see if I was mocking her, or if I understood more than I should. It didn't, she said. But last night, she inhaled slowly, the kind of breath people take before admitting something painful. Last night, I kept replaying that moment. When I stepped too close. When you didn't move. I stepped toward her, not touching, but cutting the distance in half. You weren't the only one replaying it. Her lips parted just slightly. She didn't smile, didn't blush, just stared at me like she'd been waiting for that line and dreading it at the same time. We can't do this, she said. Do what? My voice was steadier than I felt. Pretend we're strangers. Her voice shook. Just once, but I heard it. A long pause followed. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where both people see the truth clearly and don't know how to hold it without breaking something. She took a slow step back, rubbing her palm against her wrist, nervous, controlled, trying to hide it. You're young, she whispered. You have an entire life ahead of you. And here I am, standing in a repair shop, like some foolish woman who forgot how to draw boundaries. You're not foolish, I said. She gave a small, pained exhale. Then what am I doing? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the truth wouldn't come out clean. She finally looked up, eyes glassy, not with tears, but with exhaustion, like she'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. I'm afraid, she said quietly, of wanting something I shouldn't. And that was the line that stole the breath from my chest. I told myself I wouldn't bring it up again. What she said the day before, I'm afraid of wanting something I shouldn't, had replayed in my head so many times I could feel the echo of it in my bones. But when she showed up the next evening, she wasn't the same woman who had stood in front of me with trembling honesty. She looked weighed down. Her coat was buttoned wrong, one loop skipped. Her hair, usually neat, hung loosely at her shoulders. She walked in without greeting me, without glancing around. She just placed her phone on the counter, face down again, and whispered, "Can you give me a minute?" I nodded, not touching her, not moving closer. just giving her the space she was too tense to ask for properly. She leaned against the counter with both hands, head bowed. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Finally, she pushed her phone toward me. It played while I was driving. I didn't expect it. I hesitated. You want me to fix something on it? No, she said. I want you to just listen. Her fingers brushed mine accidentally, or maybe intentionally. I couldn't tell anymore. I picked up the phone. The voicemail icon blinked. Are you sure? She nodded, jaw tight. I pressed play. A voice, older, weary, unmistakably male, filled the air from the tiny speaker. Hey, I know you won't answer. You never do. But, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left things like that. I hope you're okay. I really do. I heard the news about Mara. Just call me back when you're ready. Please. The message ended. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. I placed the phone gently on the counter. Mara, I asked softly. Her eyes closed, just for a heartbeat. My sister. I didn't know what to say. She kept her head down, fingers tightening on the edge of the wooden counter until her knuckles went pale. She passed last year, she said. Suddenly. No warnings. And he? She swallowed loudly. He left 3 months after the funeral. Said he needed space to grieve. Her voice cracked. Space from me. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. I'm sorry, I whispered. She shook her head. You're not the one who needs to apologize. Silence stretched, thin, fragile. She finally looked up at me. And for the first time since I'd met her, her eyes didn't look guarded or cautious. They looked undone, as if she'd allowed something inside her to unravel in front of me. You remind me of her, she said. The words hit me like a quiet blow. Your patience. The way you listen without forcing anything. The way you stand there like you're trying to hold the world steady for someone. I didn't know what to do with that. My hands hung uselessly at my sides. I shouldn't transfer that onto you, she added quickly. It's not fair. It's not healthy. But sometimes I walk in here, and for a moment, I don't feel alone. Her voice broke on that last word. I moved one step closer, not touching, not crowding, just letting her know I wasn't stepping back. She stared at me with something raw, almost frightened, and whispered, Tell me I'm not losing my mind. She didn't leave after asking that. She just stood there, breathing shallowly, shoulders drawn in like she was waiting to be told she'd crossed some line that couldn't be uncrossed. You're not losing your mind, I said quietly. You're just tired, hurt, human. Her lips trembled, not a sob, not even close, but the kind of small, involuntary shake that happens when someone tries too hard to stay composed. She walked past me, slow and deliberate, settling onto the old stool near the workbench. The same one she always gravitated to, like her body remembered the shape of the space even when her mind was scattered. I didn't sit. Not yet. I leaned on the counter across from her, close enough to feel the soft warmth of her presence, not close enough to overwhelm her. For a long time, we didn't speak. The shop creaked in the quiet. A fan hummed. Dust floated in the strip of light between us. There was no romance, no tension in the dramatic sense. Just two people who had run out of ways to pretend they weren't orbiting each other. Finally, she rubbed her thumb over her palm and whispered, I don't know what this is. I don't either, I said. Her eyes lifted, searching me for something, permission, maybe, or confirmation that she wasn't imagining the gravity pulling us together. But, she said slowly, I know it's not wrong. Not the part where I talk to you, or sit here, or breathe easier when I walk in. A pause. The wrong part is how much I need it. My chest tightened, not in excitement, but in recognition. She wasn't confessing love. She was confessing dependence, guilt, fear, all the tangled things that masquerade as something simpler. It's not just you, I said. Her shoulders lowered a fraction, a slow exhale slipping from her like she'd been waiting days to hear she wasn't alone in this confusion. I finally sat beside her, leaving an inch of space between us, but no more. She didn't pull back. I felt her warmth, the faint rise and fall of her breath. Her hand rested on her thigh, fingers twitching like she was working up the courage to steady them. I don't want to replace anyone, I said. Not your sister. Not the life you had. I'm not trying to fill empty spaces. I know, she murmured. But I also don't want to lie. I swallowed. I don't want distance from you. Her head bowed slightly, as if the honesty was almost too much. A minute passed, maybe more. Then she shifted, barely, as her hand slid closer to mine. Not touching, just inviting. When our fingers finally brushed, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, almost accidental. But the jolt of it, the simplicity, felt like something unlocking. She let her hand settle there, against my knuckles, warm and steady. No words, no declaration, just shared air, shared weight, shared understanding. After a while, she leaned her forehead gently against my shoulder, not sinking, not collapsing, just letting herself rest for the first time in what felt like years. Her voice was a whisper, softer than breath. Don't go, not tonight. And that was all either of us needed to say. I think about that night more often than I admit. Not for the reasons people might assume, not because of the closeness or the warmth of her forehead resting lightly against my shoulder. I think about it because it was the first time in my life that silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Looking back now, it's strange how little either of us said. No confessions, no promises, just two people who finally stopped pretending they weren't hurting, and for a moment, let the other see the cracks. She once told me that grief makes time behave strangely, stretching hours into days, shrinking months into minutes. I didn't fully understand that until I met her. How one conversation could change your entire internal landscape. How one person could hold a softness inside them they never show the world, and somehow you become the one they trust with it. After that night, everything shifted quietly. She didn't show up every day. Sometimes a week passed without seeing her, and I learned not to panic, not to read into the silence the wrong way. She was learning how to breathe again, and I was learning how to stand beside her without needing to fix every broken part. She told me once, months later, over cold tea at her kitchen counter, that she used to think love only counted if it looked loud, grand, certain, blazing, the kind people celebrated. But what we had, it wasn't loud. It was a slow, steady warmth, something small that grew between us when neither of us was looking. And I guess she taught me something in return, that wanting someone isn't childish. And being wanted, really seen, really chosen, isn't a mistake, even when the world says it should be complicated. People ask me now, in that half-joking, half-curious tone, what it's like being with someone older, someone who's lived whole chapters before I even started mine. I never know how to answer them properly. How do you explain that age stops mattering when someone's presence fits into your life like a missing rhythm? Or that she didn't make me older, she made me clearer, softer. She taught me that strength doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like admitting what scares you and staying anyway. And her? She laughs more now. Real laughs, the kind that start quietly, like she's surprised she hasn't forgotten how. She still has days where she disappears into herself, but she doesn't shut me out. She lets me sit with her in the quiet, and that feels like the purest version of trust I've ever known. I think that's the thing we both learned. Love doesn't arrive like lightning. It arrives like the slow lifting of a storm, the kind that leaves everything softer, cleaner, possible. So when people ask how we started, I don't tell them about the dramatic moments. I tell them about the night she whispered, "Don't go, not tonight." Because that was the moment I realized staying isn't an act of love. Choosing to stay again and again and again is. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?